Greetings of the day to all my dear students. I hope that you all are in good health. The thought for the day is you can't have a better tomorrow if you are still thinking about yesterday. This is Shreya Jadhav welcoming you all to my e-learning channel, and today we are going to do English Grade 12 Chapter 7, The Interview, written by Christopher Sylvester. So let us know something about the author. Christopher Sylvester has been a freelance journalist and author since the early 1980s. He cut his teeth on a fortnightly satirical magazine Private Eye, where he wrote the New Boys profiles of newly elected MPs during the Thatcher years. He also contributed to the Eyes, the Street of Shame and Grovel columns, as well as writing investigative reports on business. Introduction for answer. Prose name, The Interview. Author's name, Christopher Sylvester. Genre, Interview. Summary. Following is an excerpt taken from his introduction to the Penguin Book of Interview, an anthology from 1859 to the present day. So now let us have a quick look on summary. The interview, written by Christopher Sylvester, briefs the new invention, interview, in the field of journalism. Interview that was invented over 130 years have become a commonplace in journalism. Today, every literate or illiterate will have to experience interview at some point of the daily life. However, opinions of interview, of its functions, methods, and merits vary considerably. Some claim it as a source of truth and in its practice an art. Others despise the interview as an unwarranted instructions into their lives. They feel it diminishes them. Sylvester lists out well-known writers who are against interview. V.S. Naipaul, Lewis Carroll, Rudyard Kipling, H.G. Wells, though he had interviewed many personalities. It is surprising to notice that as interviewer, each one is comfortable, whereas an interviewee, they feel it much disturbing and diminishing. Yet, in the words of the writer, it is serviceable medium communication. The interview, a commonplace of journalism, since its invention a little over 130 years ago, the interview has become a commonplace. Different opinions about interview. Some claim that an interview is a source of truth and in its practice it is an art, while some other think that interview is an unwarranted instructions into their lives and somehow it diminishes them. Then we have part 2 in this chapter, which is this is an extract from an interview of Umberto Eco, author of the popular novel Name of the Rose by Mukund Padmanabhan from The Hindu. This interview helps us to know many aspects of writing style and ideas. Eco has accomplished a good reputation over his ideas and the study of science. He has written wide range of books. His novel, The Name of Rose, brought him name and fame. Mukund asks Eco how he can do so many things in his life. Eco reveals a secret about himself. He says that we have all a lot of empty spaces in our lives. He calls them intersects. If we fill empty spaces with our work, we can achieve a lot of success in our life. He also tells Mukund that he considers himself a university professor who writes novels on Sunday. He became a novelist by chance, though he gives the impression of doing many things at a time. He says that he is doing the same things, pursuing his philosophical interest through his writing and novels. Though his modest answers, he tells the secret of his success. He utilizes those empty spaces to his advantage. Eco Pen Academician refers himself to be called as an academician. He has written 40 philosophical writings and just 5 novels. When Mukund asks the reason behind his huge success, he admits and he honestly replies the mystery even to him. Perhaps the appropriateness of the time it was written could be the reason. He himself admits that the novel came 10 years later or earlier, the novel would not have got such success. As we go through this extract, we can easily note that Umberto Eco does not think interview is a crime or an offense. He interacts properly and modestly. So, dear students, this is all about the summary of the chapter. Now, let us proceed and go through the reading and explanation of the chapter. Since its invention a little over 130 years ago, the interview has become a commonplace of journalism. Today, almost everybody who is literate will have read an interview at some point in their lives. While from the other point of view, several thousand celebrities have been interviewed over the years, some of them repeatedly. So it is hardly surprising that opinions of the interview, of its functions, methods, and merits vary considerably. Some might make quite extravagant claims for it as being in its highest form a source of truth, and it is its practice and art. Others, usually celebrities who see themselves as its victims, might despise the interview as an unwarranted intrusions into their lives or feel that it somehow diminishes them. Just as in some primitive cultures it is believed that if one takes photographic portrait of somebody, then one is stealing that person's soul. So in the introduction it has been said that interview was invented 130 years ago. Interview is a very common word and has a common place in journalism. And today, almost every literate person might have in their lifetime gone through this word called interview. And they might have this basic form of knowing what the word is. Some consider it as an advantageous point, some consider as an unwarranted intrusion into their personal life. They seem so that it steals their private space. So we can say like that interview has its merits as well as its demerits. It is totally upon a person how they take into consideration. We as Nepal feels that some people are wounded by interviews and lose a part of themselves. Lewis Carroll, the creator of Alice in Wonderland, was said to have had a just horror of interviewer, and he never consented to be interviewed. It was his horror of being lionized which made him thus repel would be acquaintances, interviewers, and the persistent petitioners for his autograph, and would afterwards relate the stories of his success in silencing all such people with much satisfaction and amusement. Rudyard Kipling expressed an even more condemnatory attitude towards the interviewer. His wife Caroline writes in her diary for 14th October 1892 that their days were wrecked by two reporters from Boston. She reports her husband as to saying, "Reporters, why do I refuse to be interviewed? Because it is immoral, it is a crime, just as much as a crime as an offense against my person as an assault, and just as much merits punishment." So now over here the writer has expressed few writers who are against interview. For example, V.S. Naipaul, Lewis Carroll, Rudyard Kipling. These people do not like to be interviewed. They think that their personal space is being taken away. Over here, one of the incident is being shared by Rudyard Kipling's wife Caroline. She writes in her diary that they were being interviewed to by two reporters, which eventually it seems so as if they were committing some sort of crime and offense, and they were supposed to be given some sort of punishment. Like for other crimes, it has been given. If a person refuses to be interviewed, then the reporters should not force them to give answer. It is cowardly and vile. No respectable man would ask it, much less give it. Yet Kipling had himself perpetuated such an assault on Mark Twain only few years before. H. G. Wells, in an interview in 1894, referred to the interviewing ordeal, but was a fairly frequent interviewee, and 40-year-old years later found himself interviewing Joseph Stalin. Saul Bellow, who has consented to be interviewed on several occasions. Nevertheless, one described interviews as being like a thumbprint on his windpipe. Yet, despite the drawbacks of the interviews, it is supremely serviceable medium of communication. So over here it has been said that H. G. Wells, he was also one of them who was not comfortable in giving interview. But still, after 40 years, he was the one who was an interviewee, and the means he was going to take interview of other people. So as when time changes, it is something like you are supposed to ask concern of the person whether that person wants to be interviewed or not, and they are not supposed to be forced with that thing. Although there are many negative points about interview, but we can state like this, that it is one of the main serviceable medium of communication. These days, more than at any other time, our most vivid impression of our contemporaries are through interviews. Dennis Brain has written, "Almost everything of moment reaches us through one man asking question of another. Because of this, the interviewer holds a position of unprecedented power and influence." So, in this short essay sort of thing, we have seen the pros and cons of interview, but at the end we have a person called Dennis Brain, and he says that interview is such a good thing that we can have everything about a person. One person asks all sort of questions, whatever they want to know, and the other person asks, means replies to all the questions being asked. But one of the most important thing which every one of us should remember is we are supposed to take consent. We are supposed to take permission of that person, whether the person wants to get interviewed or not. We cannot force any person that compulsory you are supposed to give answer. Part 2. That is, I am a professor who writes novels on Sunday, says Umberto Eco. The following is an excerpt from an interview of Eco. The interviewer is Mukund Padmanabhan. from The Hindu. Umberto Eco, a professor at the University of Bologna in Italy, had already acquired a formidable reputation as a scholar for his ideas on semiotics, the study of science, literary interpretations, and medieval aesthetics before he turned to writing fiction, literary fiction, academic text, essays, children's books, newspaper articles. His written output is strategically large and wide ranging. In 1980, he acquired the equivalent of intellectual superstardom with the publication of The Name of the Rose, which sold more than 10 million copies. So, this part 2 is an excerpt which is taken from the interview of Eco, who is the author of a very popular novel called Name of the Rose. And this interview is taken by Mukund. He is a journalist from the newspaper called The Hindu. And over here we have a very good conversation imprinted over here, that how eventually interviews are being taken and how they are, how minutest detail of the person we can have. Mukund. The English novelist and academic David Lodge once remarked, I can't understand how one man can do all the things he does. Over he means Eco. Eco replies, maybe I give the impression of doing many things, but in the end, I am convinced I am always doing the same thing. So, over here, one of the novelists whose name is David Lodge, he is giving remark about Eco, and he is telling that he is unable to understand how can one person do plenty of things in a day or in their schedule or in their life. And to this, Eco replies that it impresses, it seems so that he is doing plenty of work, but eventually at the end he is doing the same sort of stuff he used to do every day. This was not something extraordinary which he used to do. Mukund is asking, which is Eco? Now that is more difficult to explain. I have some philosophical interest and I pursue them through my academic work and my novels. Even my books for children are about nonviolence and peace. You see, the same bunch of ethical philosophical interests. And then I have a secret. Did you know that will happen if you eliminate the empty space from the universe? Eliminate the empty space in all the atoms. The universe will become as big as a feast, as my feast. So over here, Mukund is trying to ask that which is that secret, what things you do. And Eco says that now this is considered to be a difficult question. That Eco as a person has plenty of different interests. He has philosophical interest, he has his academic work, he writes novels, he even writes books for children, which are all about non-violence and peace. And he is an ethical philosophical person. Moreover to that, he shares one of the secrets, and he shares that if we remove the empty spaces from the universe, what will remain at the end? It will only be that the universe will become as big as his feast. Similarly, we have a lot of empty spaces in our lives. I call them interstices. Say you are coming over to my place. You are in an elevator, and while you are coming up, I am waiting for you. This is an empty space. I work in empty spaces. While waiting for your elevator to come up from the first to third floor, I have already written my article. So now This is a very common concept which he is trying to amplify, and he is trying to say that utilize the time which is given to you. Even a single minute or even 5 to 10 minutes can make a huge difference. Although it is not like that we could complete the whole thing, it is not possible to complete the whole task, but although we have initiated it, and by doing portion by portion and completing some coverage, we will be able to complete it within no time. And then we are not supposed to put extra time duration for it. Now, Mukund is asking, not everyone can do that, of course. Your non fictional writing, your scholarly work has a certain playful and personal quality about it. It is a marked departure from a regular academic style, which is invariably depersonalized and often dry and boring. Have you consciously adopted an informal approach, or it is something that just came naturally to you? Now, Mukund is trying to say that this thing is not everyone's cup of tea. It requires a lot of hard work, it requires plenty of courage to start up. At first, you may make plenty of mistakes, there may be hurdles in between, but after a certain time duration, you get habituated to those things. And how he had no inherited that thing, or it was that naturally he had within him. And Eco is trying to say, when I presented my first doctoral dissertation in Italy, one of the professors said, scholars learn a lot of a certain subject, then they make a lot of false hypotheses, then they correct them, and at the end they put the conclusion. You, on the contrary, told the story of your research, even including your trials and error. At the same time, he recognized I was right and went on to publish my dissertation as a book, which meant he appreciated. So now, eventually, what happened? That when Eco is trying to share that when for the first time when he was presenting his thesis in front of his professor, one of his professors said that scholars learn a lot about a particular subject, then they put plenty of their hypotheses, then at the end they put the conclusion. But you are supposed to be a person who is different from everyone. And the Eco had presented his own story about research. He has even put up his trials and errors, that where he committed mistakes and how everything happened. At that point, at the age of 22, I understood scholarly books should be written the way I had done. By telling the story of the research, this is why my essay always have a narrative aspect. And this is why probably I started writing narratives which are novels so late at the age of 50 more or less. So it was something that when Eco was 22 years old, he understood that how these sort of books are written. And moreover to that, he used to tell a descriptive how the narratives are supposed to be written. And his writings, his essays have always been a very descriptive point, because he always writes his own experience, that what he felt, what he has undergone, all the positive and negative aspects. And that is the reason that he had started writing novels so late at the age of 50. I remember that my dear friend Roland Barthes was always frustrated that he was an essayist and not a novelist. He wanted to do creative writing one day or another, but he died before he could do so. I never felt this kind of frustration. I started writing novels by accident. I had nothing to do one day, so I started. Novels probably satisfied my taste of narration. So usually he used to write essay, but then one fine day he had nothing else to do, so he started writing novels. And while writing it, he was satisfied with it. Mukund. Talking about novels, from being a famous academic, you went on becoming a spectacularly famous after the publication of The Name of the Rose. You have written 5 novels against many more scholarly works of non fiction, at least more than 20 of them. Eco, over 40. Mukund, over 40. Among them, a seminal piece of work on semiotics. But ask most people about Eco and they will say, oh, he's novelist. Does that bother you? Yes, because I consider myself a university professor who writes novels on Sundays. It's not a joke. I participate in academic conferences and not meetings of pen clubs and writers. I identify myself with the academic community. So, moreover to that, he has written 5 novels and they were that gave him name and fame. But moreover to that, he had written many other books, over 40 books on semiotics, but people still remember him as a novelist. And then he tries to say that, okay, I he says that he is actually not a novelist, he is still a university professor, because rather going to pen clubs and writers community, he goes to academic conferences. So he wants himself to be identified as an academic writer. But okay, if they have read only the novels, I know that by writing novels I reach a larger audience. I cannot expect to have 1 million readers with stuff on semiotics. So he also tries to say that major of the people remembers me as a novelist, and this is common because his writing as a novelist reaches plenty of audience. And while writing on semiotics, 1 million readers may not read it because they might not be interested in it. And novel is something which attracts common people's attention. Mukund says, which brings me to my next question. The Name of the Rose is a very serious novel. It's a detective yen at one level, but it also delves into a metaphysics, theology, and medieval history. Yet it enjoyed a huge mass audience. Were you puzzled at all by this? Eco, no, journalists are puzzled and sometimes publishers. And this is because journalists and publishers believe that people like trash and don't like difficult reading experiences. Consider there are 6 billion people on this planet. The Name of the Rose sold between 10 to 15 million copies. So, in a way, I reached only a small percentage of readers, but it is exactly these kind of readers who don't want easy experiences, or at least don't always want this. I myself at 9 a.m. after dinner watch television and want to see either Miami Vice or Emergency Room. I enjoy it and I need it, but not all day. So now eventually the Mukund is asking, putting forward a question, and he's trying to say that when he was writing this book, at that time this book was a very serious topic, and at that time usually novels are very light-hearted, romantic sort of. But Eco is trying to say that always people do not want fancy and romantic stuff. Always they do not want things which are enjoyable and happy enough. But this book has reached up to 10 to 15 billion people. So we can say like that always people do not want the same taste. They also want something interesting, they also want something difficult to read, which would be so much enjoyable and which could be out of the box to think about it. Could the huge success of the novel have anything to do with the fact that it dealt with the period of medieval history that? Eco, that's possible, but let me tell you another story, because I often tell stories like Chinese wise man. My American publisher said that she loved my book. She didn't expect to sell more than 3,000 copies in a country where nobody had seen a cathedral or studied Latin. So I was given an advance for 3,000 copies but in the end it sold 2 to 3 millions in the US. So now it was something that the book was a very difficult topic, a very serious topic. So when he went to America, one of the publisher loved it, and the publisher thought that only 3,000 copies would go, but eventually it ended up more than 2 to 3 million copies in US. So people want something different to read, not the same concept every now and then. A lot of books have been written about the medieval past far before mine. I think the success of the book is a mystery. Nobody can predict it. I think if I had written the name of the rose 10 years earlier or 10 years later, it wouldn't have been the same. Why it worked at that time is a mystery. So at the end, the narrator, means Eco, is trying to say that the reason why the book was written in that particular time duration is a complete mystery. Why it was a success, that is also a complete mystery. But if that wasn't written on that particular time, if it was written 10 years before or it was written 10 years after, then the book didn't claim that sort of success what Eco had no got that name and fame in his life. So how and why that book worked is a total mystery. So dear students, this is all about the chapter. I hope that every one of you have understood it. Thank you for watching and have a nice day everyone.